Welcome into our final preview of Ohio State versus Texas. I'm Dan Hope, joined by Chase Brown and Andy Anders, as we are now within 24 hours of Ohio State versus Texas. We have been anticipating this game for months. We're finally at the point where we can stop talking about the game that's about to happen. We can actually watch the game and talk about a game that actually does happen. Andy, as we sit here now within hours of the game actually happened, just what are you feeling? What's kind of the vibes you're feeling about this game?
Yeah, to me, as I kind of sit and think about keys to the game, a couple pop to mind for me. First, it's going to be what is Brian Hartline's first time as a play caller look like? I think there's going to be a lot of guidance from Ryan Day, from other coaches. He's going to have input. They're going to have a big plan going into this week. But what are the reins that we see? How aggressive does he come out? How does Ohio State establish the run game since that's not where his background is? And then another for me, I mean, we talked about it earlier this week on when Texas is on offense, 8 of the 9 starters in the trenches for Ohio State and Texas, 4 of Texas's 5 offensive linemen, all 4 of Ohio State's defensive linemen will be new starters. Mix of guys that have some experience on both sides that are just new starters and stepping into those new roles, but it's another level when it raises. So as I look at keys to the game, I think Ohio State winning the line of scrimmage defensively and even offensively taking advantage on the interior, but defensively especially, those 4 starters have to establish themselves. I think we've heard Ryan Day mention at defensive tackle, defensive end, there will be some rotation too. So who mixes in? How can Ohio State win that battle up front? Because if you can slow the Texas running game, and I know it's Arch Manning, everyone's excited for the debut, but this is a new quarterback, and any offense made one-dimensional is going to have a tough time against a defense of the caliber Ohio State is presenting. So if you can win the line of scrimmage battle defensively for Ohio State, force Texas to become predictable throwing the football, I think you're going to see a lot of success on Saturday.
Chase, how about you? What do you view as maybe the biggest key to this matchup tomorrow?
I think there's two things. It's going to be both penalties and turnovers. I think Ryan Day and Steve Sarkisian have really stressed the need to play clean, disciplined football in this game. And that's the case of any matchup game, right? You have two like teams. Texas coming in as a number 1 ranked team in the country. Ohio State's number 2 in the coaches poll, number 3 in the AP poll. This is a battle between two of the best teams in college football entering the fall. And so when you have these like opponents, it's going to be a matter of who wins the turnover battle and who keeps themselves in front of the sticks. Ryan Day has said plenty of times this week that last year's Cotton Bowl, Ohio State didn't play as disciplined and as clean as they needed to win that football game. Now, they had some pretty big moments, right? Travion Henderson has that screen that he takes all the way to the house. Jack Sawyer gets a scoop and score touchdown. But Ohio State's offense, outside of a few drives, really stalled in a couple of different areas, largely because of penalties. And so if Ohio State can keep itself clean in this game, I think they feel confident going into this matchup that they can hang with Texas and that they can beat them. I'm sure Texas is also feeling the same if they can accomplish what they want to accomplish on the sides of the football by playing clean and disciplined.
If we're each going to do two things, and I'll mention two things, I'll start with one. I mean, it's the obvious one, but we haven't talked about it specifically yet, so it's worth talking about, is who plays better, Julian Sayin or Arch Manning? I mean, I think that is going to be a huge key to this game on both sides. Is you have Julian Sayin, who's playing, really his first meaningful action in college football, period, versus Arch Manning, who's made a couple of starts, but they were against, I think, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State. Nothing of this magnitude. Which quarterback lives up to the hype? Do they both live up to the hype? Do they both struggle, or does one clearly outplay the other? If one clearly outplays the other, that team is likely going to win. If both have their ups and downs over the course of a game, then maybe it doesn't necessarily come down to the quarterbacks. But I think for both of those guys, how they fare in this first start is going to be the key. I mean, is Arch Manning truly going to be this Heisman contender, number 1 overall pick that people think he's going to be? Or in his first real test, does, maybe some of that hype wilt a little bit? And then for Julian Sayin, is he going to be able to come in with no experience in anything even close to this and be able to make the plays that Ohio State needs him to make, avoid the turnovers like Chase talked about? Really don't know. I mean, it's really kind of anybody's guess what exactly we're going to see from Julian Sayin. Ohio State has expressed a lot of confidence in him. Brandon Inniss was saying on Wednesday night that, he's taken a step and his game has been different since he was named that starting quarterback. So it feels like he's building some momentum going into this game. But now the real test comes on Saturday. And then I think, on the other side of the ball, specific to Ohio State, it's how does Matt Patricia's defense come out of the gate? I know, looking at pretty much the entire staff score predictions, I think we all picked a variation of 27-24. Andy and I both siding with Texas, Chase siding with Ohio State. We'll get back to that in a minute. But looking at the staff-wide predictions, pretty much everyone on our staff has this game somewhere in the 20s. I think the over-under for this game is around 47 and a half. And so that means for Ohio State's defense, they've got to be really good coming out of the gate. You've got to, if that's the kind of game we're all expecting, and there's good reason to expect that kind of game. I mean, Texas has 3 preseason All-Americans on its defense. So this probably isn't going to be the kind of game that Ohio State's going to be able to put up 40 points. So that defense with 8 new starters and a new coordinator, how do they come out of the gates? Can they pick up where Jim Knowles left off and be an elite defense right off the bat? Or are there going to be some growing pains with all these new starters and a new system? If there are those kind of growing pains, then I think I think it will be difficult for Ohio State to win if the defense really struggles. I mean, I think there's going to be some growing pains on both sides of the ball no matter what, but I think you look at between Julian Sayin and between that Ohio State defense, you're not going to expect everything to be perfect in game one, but you do need both sides to, when they do make mistakes, be able to bounce back, be able to make winning plays the next drive, because this Texas team is too talented, too good coming in for either side of a ball to struggle consistently and be able to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like one thing with Ohio State coming into this matchup has been a conversation about the coordinators with Brian Hartline and Matt Patricia. I do think it is noteworthy that Ryan Day has mentioned whenever he's discussed Brian Hartline's game planning for this, that he was impressed with the way Brian Hartline game planned in the playoff last year. And he also understands that this is Texas. It's not Grambling or Ohio. So it's all hands on deck when it comes to preparation for this thing. So Ryan Day has been quick to mention that Billy Fessler has been helping Brian Hartline, and so has Carlos Lachlan, and so has Keenan Bailey and Tyler Bowen. It's been a group effort with those full-time assistant coaches, I guess, if we still call them full-time assistants. But then there's also a ton of offensive analysts that Ohio State has that are all contributing to creating a great game plan for Ohio State heading into this thing. And then I also think with Matt Patricia, his experience both in the NFL as a successful defensive coordinator and his experience as a head coach are things that you should note going into this thing. I did think also, too, I don't know if you guys saw from the Downs to Business podcast, the Josh Downs and Caleb Downs podcast that just debuted this week, that Caleb Downs was talking about Matt Patricia, and he called him a different coach because he hangs his hat on being a teacher, is what Caleb Downs said. And he said that he's learned so much from Matt Patricia in the time that they've spent together over the past 8 or 9 months or so, and that he feels that every time they're together, he learns something which allows them to play fast. And I think playing fast is something that you're going to hear a lot of Ohio State players talking about throughout this season, but especially in the season opener when they're playing against a team as talented as Texas.
Yeah. And I think another key to this game, too, that needs mentioning is Jeremiah Smith, right? And what's Texas's plan against Jeremiah Smith? How does Ohio State scheme up Jeremiah Smith? We all know the stat line. Everyone's heard the stat line to this point. 1 catch for 3 yards that Jeremiah had in the Cotton Bowl. Averaged over 120 receiving yards in the other 3 college football playoff games Ohio State played last year. This isn't a guy who gets taken out of games very frequently, and I would expect that frequency to go down even as teams are even more aware of him. I expect this year 1 to year 2 leap for Jeremiah Smith. But the question is, if he is bracketed on certain plays, if Texas is able to isolate him, roll the coverages, and eliminate him from the equation, can Julian Sand come to that second read, and is that guy going to be open? I think you have faith in Carnell Tate and even Brandon Ennis. I mean, the strides he's made, becoming a captain, becoming a leader, always had the athleticism. But I think another person to watch in this game is going to be Max Clare, right? Closer to the quarterback, you're going to get some favorable matchups. We've heard him called the best route running tight end by teammates, the best route running tight end they've ever seen, all this stuff. Does the game translate from Purdue? I think a lot of us expect it to, but that could be favorable matchups to find if Jeremiah Smith is like Texas's entire focus. But you've also got to find ways to get Jeremiah involved that Texas can't counter. I think doing some things with him behind the line of scrimmage, like we saw in the college football playoff national championship game. I think a lot of people remember that touchdown where it looked like Jeremiah is going to run an end around, and then he bounces back in the motion and they throw it out to him, and then they score a touchdown that way. Like creative play designs like that don't give Texas a chance to take him out of the game, and can also potentially be easy completions for Julian Sand. Although I'll also say, like, if you just send him on a go ball and let Julian chuck it out there, I'm never going to be opposed to saying F it 4 down there somewhere.
And I thought it was interesting what Brandon Ennis said on Wednesday as well, where, he was asked about, if they expect that Texas will, try to bracket Jeremiah like they did a year ago. And he basically said, he said it'd be dumb not to try to cover Jeremiah one-on-one, but JJ is still JJ. And I said it on our 11 Warriors live show earlier this week. Like, I'm expecting a huge game from Jeremiah Smith because I just think he's too good for Texas to be able to shut him down 2 years in a row. If they do, props to them. But, I just don't see it. Yeah, I think, even though I think, when I look at the overall rosters, and I broke this down in 11 Warriors earlier this week, but I do think, for me, when I look at the overall rosters for Ohio State versus Texas, I do think that overall, you look at it, Texas has a few more proven commodities. I think, the position that really stands out is the defensive line, where I think, Texas, all of their projected starters, whether they're returning guys or guys they got through the transfer portal, they're all guys that have played a lot of football. In Ohio State's case, they're all guys who have been backups, who are kind of stepping up into bigger roles this year. You add in, Anthony Hill, Michael Taft, to what they've got up front. Defensively, I look at it and I say, I think defensively, I give the edge to Texas because of the fact that even though Ohio State has Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs, is those two returning stars, some guys that I think are going to be breakout stars like Jermaine Matthews and Kenyatta Jackson and Arvell Reese. I just feel like there's a few more proven commodities on that Texas defense, a little bit less that's changing from a year ago, whereas I think Ohio State may have some more growing pains, in their first game with a new defensive coordinator. Offensive side of the ball, again, a lot of it is going to come down to that Julian Sand versus Arch Manning matchup. But, the one thing I can say is Ohio State is Jeremiah Smith and Texas doesn't. Ohio State also has Carnell Tate and Max Clare and Brandon Ennis. So I think the one clear edge that I think Ohio State has is that the pass catching playmakers. I think, they have the better playmakers in the passing game. That's going to be true in pretty much every game we talk about with Ohio State. I also think their offensive line has more returning experience, more guys who have played together as a cohesive unit. So I think, to me, I look at it, those are probably the two positions where Ohio State could have the biggest advantage if you're just comparing position group versus position group, what pass catchers, offensive line. But I'll ask you, Chase, someone who picked Ohio State to win this game, what do you look at and see as the biggest edge that Ohio State has in its favor?
I just think they have the two best players in this game when it comes to Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. And, unfortunately, with my pick, I will acknowledge that those two players are in positions that don't touch the ball every play. If you're Jeremiah Smith, he's not the quarterback, and a safety is not traditionally a player that's involved in every play. Though I do think Ohio State can be creative in getting the ball into Jeremiah Smith's hands in ways that don't involve him being double covered, in ways that don't involve him being bracketed. Think about all the times that Ohio State used to run the pop pass in the Urban Meyer days with Paris Campbell coming across the middle. Could they do something like that? Could they get him involved in a screen game? Could they get him these quick action routes that take away or nullify Texas's ability to keep him covered on one side of the field. And I also think with Caleb Downs, Ohio State proved last year schematically that they can put him pretty much anywhere and he's going to make an impact. He could stand probably all places except defensive tackle, I think, would be a spot where I think
You never
Caleb
know.
Downs could really have an impact. But I'm not going to limit him to that, right? He could probably do it if he
Throw him in
wanted
there
to.
at pre-tech on a passing down and just let him get after it.
Exactly right. And I just think, and when it comes to that, those two guys are transcendent. And everyone throws around the words generational today, but those guys truly are generational in the way that they can impact a football game. And so that's why I think those two guys could make enough plays that would lead to an Ohio State win. And some of the other names that you mentioned, Dan, I'm excited to see play this season as well. Sonny Styles in his second year as linebacker playing next to Arvell Reese, Peyton Pierce mixing in there as well, Kenyatta Jackson. I think the defense can limit Arch Manning as much as possible. Maybe Ohio State can get enough first downs where they can come out with a 3-point win.
Andy, what do you look at as the biggest thing that gives you concern for Ohio State going into this game? That if Ohio State can answer that concern, they can win this game.
It's a great question. I think, like I said earlier, that the defensive line setting the line of scrimmage is very important to me, and how these new starters look. They rotate bodies to keep fresh, and if that depth is up to the task, to me, that is the number one matchup I'm looking at, because it's the biggest question mark both sides of the football, both Texas and Ohio State, will be solved in the trenches when Texas has the football. Winning that matchup to me is the biggest concern I have. And then also pass protection, right? You have two new offensive tackles. Austin Siereveld, he's been a major contributor to Ohio State last year. He's been named a captain, twice an Iron Buckeye this offseason. All the gains he's made, I don't think any player stock has risen more this offseason than Austin Siereveld. But you're still playing a position you haven't played before, and it's, when it comes to protecting Julian Sayin in this game, it's one of the most important positions on the football field for Ohio State Saturday sneakily. I mean, blocking the blind side against one of the best pass rushers in the country in Colin Simmons. And then on the other side, we expect Philip Daniels. Day was still playing coy about it yesterday when we spoke to him, wasn't committing to a starter at right tackle. Kind of said that Daniels will play a lot. It was similar to what he had said Tuesday. You get the feeling, I think we all feel fairly confident that Philip Daniels will be that guy at right tackle. But even if it's a shocker and it's Ethan Onionwa or something, whoever that guy is, that tackle position needs to step up in this game for Ohio State, needs to be ready to be the guys to take on that pass rush, that ferocious Texas pass rush that really produced last year, and give Julian Sayin time back there in the pocket. I think Ohio State's going to run some comfortable throws, some quick throws to get him in rhythm, but there are going to be times in this game where he's going to have to sit back there 3 or 4 seconds and find the open man. So that to me is, after that defensive line matchup, the other position I'm going to be watching pretty closely for Ohio State.
Well, fellows, I sure am excited to be at Pashoo tomorrow to watch this epic game between the Buckeyes and the Longhorns kicking off at noon on Fox. YouTube TV making a deal, so those of you who have YouTube TV can watch the game. For those of you who are at Pashoo, are certainly looking forward to seeing you all there in what is going to be one heck of a matchup to start the season. So please stay tuned. 11warriors.com. We got lots more coverage on there. Andy wrote a big, long preview of the game with everything you need to know about Ohio State versus Texas. We've got a contest on there. If you want a chance to win, I believe a $100 dry goods gift card. Chase has put together a nice contest for you guys. Be sure to participate in that, and we will have tons of coverage all weekend. More to come on both 11warriors.com and 11 Warriors YouTube channel. So we hope you guys will join us there. Until then, he's Andy Anders. He's Chase Brown. I'm Dan Hope. Thanks for joining us.